so close, I couldn't.
That's the hardest. That's
Well,
why I tell my students.
and with the ambient noise.
Yeah, but if we could hear ourselves, well, we can't hear. I do my best tuning to constant.
Okay.
Because if you're trying to get into a chord, a D chord, say, you're tuning to the key of D.
Yeah. Oh, that cluster again. I was thinking more tone. I was thinking more tone cluster.
No, that's what I mean.
Okay.
Like on the piano, they just play a bunch of different stuff.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be every single note. It's okay. I guess my arm probably didn't prepare.
I don't think so. No. I'm very unlikely. Didn't like it, so it's fine. Everything's silenced here. Yes, all my devices are silenced. It's switching at the end. That's tripping me up.
It changes notes on the last one.
The very last one. When I'm with that
That's
again.
why you were playing different notes.
Probably, as it was probably continuing the previous pattern. Yeah. Even though I know I'm supposed to. It's all. I never like this much in, but I need it here. There we go. Yes, a regular pencil or what? A regular pencil? Like a real pencil? Do you need an eraser? Okay. If I need an eraser, I need to go over in my case, but I've actually got my library pencil box in this case. So, you're like a 3 or a 4 or a 2? Very soft to a 4. There you go.
When word spread through Boston that a Chinese tea merchant dressed in Mandarin robes would soon arrive, curiosity filled the air. It was 1848, and although Chinese goods were widely circulated at the time, few had ever laid eyes on someone from that distant land. An era when most interactions with China were limited to porcelain, silk, and tea. Merchants even charged 50 cents, the equivalent of watching the Yankees today, for the opportunity to see a Chinese man. His name was Wong Asao. And he had quickly made a name for himself after stepping off the Babel Chinese vessel King in Boston. By 1853, his tea shops were spreading across New England from Boston to Troy, Rochester, and beyond. He was no ordinary merchant. He was a man who wove his heritage into the very fabric of American curiosity and commerce, leaving an indelible impression wherever he went. The Boston Post highlighted the opening on October 1st, 1852. Asao possessed extensive experience in this tea industry in China and is regarded as the foremost expert on teas in this country. He was a remarkable entrepreneur, ultimately gaining a great wealth. As reported by the Boston Globe, he was a great favorite with young boys and would ride them around the store pickback while the youngsters used his pigtail as a whip to urge him on. One of his pastimes was flying Chinese kites on the common, which, of course, proved of a splendid advertisement for his employers. Important news from China. 1,373 chests of Tinyu tea have just arrived. The celebrated tea was first sent to this country in 1868 by Yong Asao as a present to his brother for his use and the use of his friends. He first raised this tea in 1865, having got the sea in CANTON. And later he gathered several chests, having cured it in porcelain over a slow fire. Wong Asao and his friends tried it and found it superior to any tea they had ever seen before. So they sent samples to all the great tea dealers in Canton, Hong Kong, and Peking. And they all pronounced it the best tea they had ever seen. It had all good qualities of fine oolong and hyson, naturally, perfectly pure, delightful flavor, and very strong. was thriving in his tea business, leveraging the opportunity provided by the Erie Canal. He expanded his branch stores along the canal, gaining customers at every stop and lock with both his exceptional teas and the stories he shared. The real Chinaman has come to Rochester, and will be happy to furnish the citizen of Albion and vicinity of pure and fresh tea. Buffalo Wongasao, a Canton tea merchant in full Mandarin costume, is now in our city to establish a French store for the sale of his celebrated teas of his own importation. This famous and enterprising Chinese firm met with considerable loss by the Albany fire. We regret their misfortune, particularly as they have for years proved themselves about the only reliable dealers in the branch of business. The Chinese tea merchant who lived in Utica 25 years ago has made a fortune in Boston and educated two daughters who are said to be credit to any civilization.
Mostly.
Something near the beginning. Yeah. Well, let's take a little pause. Let me say hi to our friends who are here with us, I hope, on the live stream, or anybody who's going to be joining us in the future. I'm David Allen Miller, the Albany Symphony's conductor, and here's Dai Wei, our wonderful composer, who wrote this beautiful piece for us. Thank you, Wei, for being with us and for creating this beautiful piece for us. Maybe tell us first just a little bit about the piece and how it came into being, how you fashioned it for this very unique space that we're in.
First of all, I'm really, really happy to be here, and thank you so much to all the performers. Thank you, David, for this beautiful performance. So this piece, it's a story by Wang Asao, a Chinese tea merchant who skillfully navigates the social and economy landscape in 19th century America. He's probably the first Chinese naturalized citizen in the United States. And I want to highlight his life story, not only just about his, clever entrepreneurial spirit, but also how he crafted an experience on cultural exchange, identity, and belongings.
So, obviously, this is a sort of unusual presentation for us. We're in this incredible powerhouse here in Waterloo, New York. And we've never performed in a powerhouse. I don't know how many musical groups have performed in them. It's acoustically beautiful. This obviously is where all this incredible equipment resided back in the day when this was all done electronically, the lowering of the locks and the raising of the locks, etc. It was all powered from this room, and it's all been beautifully restored and maintained. And we really, are doing these concerts to not only to build awareness toward our big events in the summer of 2025 and 2026 around the bicentennial of the completion of the Erie Canal, but we're also doing these events, these wonderful pop-up events, to really showcase not only the uniqueness of the canal, but the uniqueness of these incredible locations along the canal and how many fascinating buildings and structures and areas and parks and there are along this beautiful canal corridor which runs more than 300 miles across the state and down around the state, etc. And so while this piece doesn't specifically have to do with Waterloo or the Waterloo powerhouse, tell us a little bit about, obviously you're a Chinese-born composer who's now living and working in Princeton, New Jersey and finishing your doctorate at Princeton, but you've been in the country 10 years, and you obviously opted to do a piece that has to do with immigration, but tell us how you found this wonderful figure and how you learned about him.
Yeah, so the text, really part of it's coming from old newspaper advertisement, generously shared with me by Craig William, and he's here today with us. I just want to say thank you so much, Craig, for your amazing support while I was writing this piece. And so I selected key ads for his tea shops built along the Erie Canal, and it was on purpose that I scrambled the timeline of the establishment of these tea shops to showcase his, the movement and the ambition for someone striving for success in a foreign land.
And obviously there are different wonderfully unique elements to the piece in addition to the beautiful string quartet writing that you're doing, both narration and singing, and then also some electronic processing, and also there's some, I gather, some pre-recorded things. Can you tell us how that is differentiated, the different materials, how you organize that?
Yeah, so the sound coming from the computer, the electronic part, were pre-recorded vocals one layer after another, overdubbed of myself in my studio. And those are, having interesting words about the kinds of tea, like oolong, Paco, Hyson, that you just heard.
But then also the process, are you processing your singing as well? Or?
Yes, live through the computer. It's all like pressing buttons silently and secretly.
To change your sound, or to change? To
process the clips, and also the sound of the words, to have like a little, reverb, echoey type of feeling, yeah.
Well, it's very impressive. It's the string quartet parts, as you can see or hear, are very complicated and beautiful, but it's a rather fast tempo and lots of meter changes, lots of mixed meter that makes it hard for us, and our musicians have done such a beautiful job of that. But you're also essentially a very critical instrumental person, because all of your narrative is essentially timed with the performance of the string quartet, right? Yes. Yeah. So I have a sort of unrelated, not unrelated, but a different set of inquiries that I've been thinking about since studying and working on and learning the piece. I was kind of struck by the fact that at least the materials that you found or chose to use all seem to be very positive, that this gentleman was a much-loved figure and viewed with great interest and appreciation and was very successful. And there's one kind of dicey line toward the end, something about his daughters were so respectable no matter where they came from. It was sort of like that. So I just, in the context of 19th century life, he came in, I guess, 1848, and was very successful in 1853, and you're talking about 1860. What is the challenging narrative for a Chinese immigrant? I would think it would be very challenging for someone coming from China, being the only Chinese person in this part of the country or the world. What did you wrestle with that at all, or was it not really part of the narrative you were working on?
Yes, because the material, the research was like really little have been written about this person, and I tried to find research written in Chinese, but unfortunately I didn't find anything. So it was really hard, and for me to just find a personal connection to somebody from that long time ago. And I think a lot of the emotion comes from pure imagination. If I was living in his time, I don't know, like somebody accompanied to his trip, come to this country and try to, find a living in this foreign land, what would I do? So a lot of emotion comes from that. So it's like consciously come out from the piece through music. Yeah, but I had a lot of fun.
It's funny because if I put myself in his shoes, I would mainly be terrified being so different from the world of the 1850s, or that we're not terribly accepting, I'm sure, of otherness. I mean, you, because you're such a positive, optimistic person, you seem to find great joy in his story and his journey. And is that similar to your 10 years here? How has your journey here been?
I think my time is a lot more, more common, that you can see more Eastern faces now. But for his time, there's rarely any, Eastern faces. And I think he really crafted this unique experience and about cultural exchange and identity and how to, feel belonged here. And he also cultivate a really unique tea culture as well among this really competitive tea trade in his time. And yeah, I think he did a great job, and I have a lot to learn from him.
He must have been very happy to find such a new market, such an open market. Are there any questions from the musicians or anyone in the room about having now just heard the piece once? Anybody who has anything they'd like Wei to explain to us or elucidate, or any questions about any aspects of it? Anybody? Emily, please. Oh, would you read the lyrics for us? Yeah, because in the room, I think on the live stream, it's much clearer than it is in the room. Or you can give parts of it to us, maybe. You want to do that?
Yes, let's do that.
Okay, do what you want to do. Here, do.
Does everybody have access to the text?
Well, the musicians have much of it in their scores, in their parts, but.
I'm going to do the first paragraph and then hand it to you. How about that?
Whatever you want to do.
When word spread through Boston that a Chinese merchant dressed in Mandarin robes would soon arrive, curiosity filled the air. It was 1848, and although Chinese goods were widely circulated at the time, few had ever laid eyes on someone from that distant land. In an era when most interactions with China were limited to porcelain, silk, and tea, merchants could even charge 50 cents, the equivalence of watching the Yankees today, for the opportunity to see a Chinese man. His name was Wang Asao, and he had quickly made a name for himself after stepping off the fable Chinese vessel King in Boston. By 1853, his tea shops were spreading across New England, from Boston to Troy, Rochester, and beyond. He was no ordinary merchant. He was a man who wove his heritage into the very fabric of American curiosity and commerce, leaving an indelible impression wherever he went.
I'll read a little bit, but then you should read the rest. The Boston Post highlighted the opening on October 1st, 1852. Arsao, or he says Arsao, possesses extensive experience in the tea industry in China and is regarded as the foremost expert on teas in this country. He was a remarkable entrepreneur, ultimately gaining great wealth. As reported in the Boston Globe, he was a great favorite with young boys and would ride them around the store pigback, in quotes, while the youngsters used his pigtail as a whip to urge him on. Oh dear. One of his pastimes was flying Chinese kites on the common, which of course proved a splendid advertisement for his employers. Important news from China. 1,373 chests of 10U tea have just arrived. The celebrated tea was first sent to this country in 1868 by Wang Arsao as a present to his brother for his own use and the use of his friends. He first raised this tea in 1865, having got the seed in CANTON, and in 1868 he gathered several chests, having cured it in porcelain over a slow fire. Wang Arsao and his friends tried it and found it superior to any tea they had ever seen before, so they sent samples to all the great tea dealers in Canton, Hong Kong, and Peking, and they all pronounced it the best tea they had ever seen. It had all the good qualities of oolong and Haisan, natural leaf, perfectly pure, delightful flavor, and very strong. And that's from the Bangor Daily Whig and Courier in 1869. And then why don't you do you mind finishing? Is that...
And then we have several tea species that was Asao's, basically what he was selling in his tea shop. But there are more than that: ginger, skin soap, Tinyu tea, oolong, yunyang, souchong, bako. And it continues. Wang Asao was thriving in his tea business, leveraging the opportunities provided by the Erie Canal. He expanded his branch stores along the canal, gaining customers at every stop and lock with both his exceptional tea and its stories he shared. The real Chinaman has come to Rochester and will be happy to furnish the citizen of Albion and vicinity with pure and fresh tea. Buffalo Wang Asao, a Canton tea merchant in Fu Mandarin costume, is now in our city to establish a branch store for the sale of his celebrated tea of his own importation. This famous and enterprising Chinese firm met with considerable loss by the Albany fire. We regret their misfortune, particularly as they have for years proved themselves about the only reliable dealers in their branch of business. Wang Asao, the Chinese tea merchant who lived in Utica 25 years ago, has made a fortune in Boston and educated 2 daughters, who are said to be credit to any civilization.
There we have it, any civilization. Okay. Any other urgent questions, or should we have another go at it? It's good? Great. Thank you, Wei.
When word spread through Boston that a Chinese tea merchant dressed in Mandarin robes would soon arrive, curiosity filled the air. It was 1848, and although Chinese goods were widely circulated at the time, few had ever laid eyes on someone from that distant land. In an era when most interactions with China were limited to porcelain, silk, and tea, merchants could even charge 50 cents, the equivalent of watching the Yankees today, for the opportunity to see a Chinese man. His name was Wang Asao. And he had quickly made a name for himself after stepping off the Fable Chinese vessel King in Boston. By 1853, his tea shops were spreading across New England from Boston to Troy, Rochester, and beyond. He was no ordinary merchant. He was a man who wove his heritage into the very fabric of American curiosity and commerce, leaving an indelible impression wherever he went. The Boston Post highlighted opening on October the 1st, 1852. Asao possessed extensive experience in the tea industry in China and is regarded as the foremost expert on teas in this country. He was a remarkable entrepreneur, ultimately gaining a great wealth. As reported by the Boston Globe, he was store pickback, while the youngsters used his pigtail as a whip to urge him on. One of his pastimes was flying Chinese kites on the common, which of course proved a splendid advertisement for his employers. Important news from China. 1,373 chests of tin-new tea have just arrived. This celebrated tea was first sent to this country in 1868 by Yong Asao. As a present to his brother, for his own use and the use of his friends. He first raised this tea in 1865, having got seed in CANTON. Later, he gathered several chests, having cured it in porcelain over a slow fire. Wang Asao and his friends tried it and found it superior to any tea they had ever seen before. So they sent samples to all the great tea leaders in Canton, Hong Kong, and Peking. And they all pronounced it the best tea they had ever seen. It had all the good qualities of fine oolong and hyson, natural leaf, perfectly pure, delightful flavor, and very strong. Leveraging the opportunity provided by the Erie Canal. He expanded his branch stores along the canal, gaining customers at every stop and lock with both his exceptional tea and the stories he shares. The real Chinaman has come to Rochester and will be happy to furnish the citizens of Albany and the vicinity of the pure and fresh tea. Buffalo Wang Asao, a Canton tea merchant in full Mediterranean costume, is now in our city to establish a branch store for the sale of his celebrated teas and his own importation. this famous and enterprising Chinese firm met with considerable loss by the Albany fire. We regret their misfortune, particularly as they have for years proved themselves about the only reliable dealers in their branch of business. The Chinese tea merchant who lived in Utica 25 years ago has made a fortune in Boston and educated $2 who are said to be credit to any civilization.
In this interlude, I want to ask Hui a little bit about her life and her compositional history and all that. I guess first of all, come into the right to the camera there, and tell us all a little bit about your own life and growing up in China and how you came here and what you've been doing in that journey.
Yeah. So before I came to the United States, I was mostly just writing mainstream pop music, and I had this 4-year contract with a label record in Taiwan. So I basically just write demos, and the producers and the A&R team would just promote it to artists or producers who are looking for the next album. And by the end of college year, or in college, the 4 years, I was basically learning counterpoint, harmony, structure, and all that, where outside of school, I am just writing pop song.
So these 4 years, that you were in college for 4 years in China? And was it in Taiwan that you were in college?
No, the company label company is in Taiwan. Yeah.
So while you were in college for the 4 years, you were going back and forth, or were you doing that 4 years after college?
No, it's during college. Yeah.
And had you traveled to America or no?
No, not at all. And so at the end of the college year, I made up my mind saying that I want to come to the United States for studying and just want to throw everything that I know behind. And I stopped doing the contract with them. And I came here and studied in North Carolina at Greensboro for 2 years. And that's like a life chapter exposing to so much music that I never heard of before. And then I went to Curtis Institute of Music for 3 years in Philadelphia. That is also another experience. That's my first time writing for orchestra, and that's how everything gets started. Just write intensely, and then after that, I came to Princeton, New Jersey for a PhD.
And you've been in Princeton for how long?
This is my 6th year, but I was away during the COVID for 2 years.
And what made you think of America as a place to go? Had you heard about the musical culture or anything, or?
What do you mean?
Like as opposed to going to Germany or going to Japan or?
No, I never know anything about this. I don't have any relatives or friend in this country. The reason that I want to go is because it's furthest away from China. I literally went to this agency company and get to know what it feels like studying Korea and Austria and Europe, and I finally just made up my mind come here.
And am I allowed to ask, why did you want to get so far away from China? Is it?
I am the single child in my family, one-child policy, and it's really intense to be a single child in your family, and I just don't want to become the tension of all the time, and yeah.
It must, and I'm sure that was my first thought. It must have been very hard for your parents when you announced that you were leaving to go so far away.
They probably have no idea what I'm doing here right now.
But I'm told they see your pieces or they hear your concerts via live streams? Or?
Yes.
Oh, that's nice. And so since you've been here, what has it been like in terms of musically? I mean, your music, if I can say, I mean, it obviously, you being Chinese, it comes from your person and yourself, and there's something, I think, to us that sounds maybe Chinese about it. Is there some melding of East and West in your music, or do you even consciously think of that? Or
No, I don't consciously think of that. It's just sort of natural. And I think there's some pop influence for sure, especially in the vocal.
do you still write pop?
Why not? But I just don't, spend major time doing that as a career,
And do you feel like the studying deep classical composition has helped the pop, or do they inform each other, or not at all?
They do, and I actually think it'll be very interesting if I started with classical music first and then go to the opposite way. I might not be the composer where I am today.
And do you have other interests and hobbies and things?
Fishing, if I can say.
Fishing.
But I can't do that anymore because ever since I get a dog, he's too much.
Too much to go fishing with.
Yes.
I see. Okay. Any questions from the room? Don't be shy. Room. See, we learn the most interesting things when we ask awkward and inappropriate questions. It's amazing, isn't it? Yeah. Anybody? Musicians? Any thoughts? Questions? This is the second piece of yours we've done. We did a beautiful piece of yours also on our festival last spring, and both pieces are beautiful. This is very arresting and very different, I'm happy to say. Yeah, it was funny. I mentioned to Dai Wei that she did a much more. It was somewhat more traditional in that it didn't have electronics processing. I mean, you sang on it with our two singers with the Dogs of Desire, but it was very traditional scoring. And so I actually requested a piece that had some electronics. And this is a beautiful melding for this great industrial space we're in of, traditional sounding music and also lots of interesting, but not overpowering processing and things like that. Yeah. Emily is the questioner of the night, of the day. Emily.
I want to ask our musicians, what's it like to play in a room like this? It's so echoey.
Great.
It has the hard surfaces and all these cool things in it.
Would any musicians like to answer that question? What is it like to play in this room? Do I need to hand them the mic? Probably, right? Or this mic?
I would say that it's lovely with this small group because you can hear yourself and you can hear everybody, and the room makes us all sound very full and like we're a whole section. It would be really difficult if there were like even 10 or 12 people playing.
Yeah, it's a very flattering acoustic. Wonderful. Yeah. Anybody else? Thoughts about the room or the space or the water music idea?
I agree. I think the personal sound is very rewarding because we get all this reflection bouncing back and ringing. But I think ensemble, it's a little tricky. Like Erica and I have most lines together, and she's way over there. But I think we adjusted. The first hour or two of rehearsal was challenging. I think we've adjusted.
I find it mostly difficult because we can't really see each other, which if we
That too.
thought about it, we probably could have arranged ourselves slightly differently. But
It's quite a privilege for us to play in a space like this, in these very unusual and unique spaces. We were actually, most of the musicians and I were standing outside at one of our breaks today, remembering back to our 2017 trip along the canal, and some of those concerts we actually played in barges on the canal, and in communities like this. And it's just a fascinating way, not only for us to have very unconventional experiences with music, but really getting to know communities and getting communities to know a little bit about us. And so it's been a wonderful journey, and we're so happy that even though it took 8 years to build the canal, so our first water music was in 2017, and we're now resuming in 24 in preparation for the big bicentennial in 25 and onward in 26. But it's so nice to especially to visit different communities, and I'd never been to Waterloo before this, and I really didn't know the Finger Lakes, even though I've lived 30 plus years in New York State. I know the area above the Finger Lakes, but it's been great to sort of experience new parts of the state. Yeah. Anything else that we want to cover before we do it again? We're getting some air in here. That's very nice. Thank you, Jared. Fresh air coming in. Anybody else? Anything else anyone wants to say? Oh, I really want to just also acknowledge Angelin Chandler from the Power Authority and Canals, who's the head of Reimagine the Canals initiative, who has really been the inspirational force and the spark plug for all of this, and has taken us around the state, seeing these amazing venues and selecting ones to perform in. So thank you, Angelin. It's great to have you with us. Yeah. Emily, anything else? We're going to say something. Good. Well, if it's okay, let's do our third and final iteration, and we'll wrap it up there. Okay. Any player concerns? No. Okay. We'll just keep trying to get it right. Good. More worried about light. Everybody still has sufficient light? Yeah? Thanks, George. Thanks, Derek. It still helps. Makes all the instruments out too. Then we'll open it wide up. No, that's great.
When word spread through Boston that a Chinese tea merchant dressed in Mandarin robes would soon arrive, curiosity filled the air. It was 1848, and although Chinese goods were widely circulated at the time, few had ever laid eyes on someone from that distant land. In an era when most interaction with China were limited to porcelain, silk, and tea, merchants could even charge 50 cents, the equivalent of watching the Yankees today, for the opportunity to see a Chinese man. His name was Wong Asel. And he had quickly made a name for himself after stepping off the fable Chinese vessel Key in Boston. By 1853, his tea shops were spreading across New England from Boston to Troy, Rochester, and beyond. He was no ordinary merchant. He was a man who wove his heritage into the very fabric of American curiosity and commerce, leaving an indelible impression wherever he went. The Boston Post highlighted the opening on October 1st, 1852. Asel possessed extensive experience in tea industry in China and is regarded as the foremost expert on teas in this country. He was a remarkable entrepreneur, ultimately gaining great wealth. As reported by the Boston Globe, he was a great favorite with young boys and would ride up around the store pickback while the youngsters used the pigtail as a whip to urge him on. One of his pastimes was flying Chinese kites on the common, which of course proved a splendid advertisement for his employers. The important news from China. 1,373 chests of Tinyu tea have just arrived. This celebrated tea was first sent to this country in 1868 by Wong Asel as a present to his brother for his own use and the use of his friends. He first raised this tea in 1865, having got the seed in CANTON. And later he gathered several chests, having cured it in porcelain over a slow fire. Wong Asel and his friends tried it and found it superior to any tea they had ever seen before. So they spent cents both to great tea dealers in Canton, Hong Kong, and Peking. And they all pronounced it the best tea they had ever seen. It had all the good qualities of fine oolong and high C. Natural leaf, perfectly pure, delightful flavor, and very strong. Leveraging the opportunity provided by the Erie Canal. He expanded his French stores along the canal, gaining customers at every stop and lock with both his exceptional tea and the stories he shared. The real Chinaman has come to Rochester and will be happy to furnish the citizen of Albion and the vicinity with pure and fresh tea. A Canton tea merchant in full Mandarin costume, is now in our city to establish a branch store for the sale of his celebrated tea of his own importation. This famous and enterprising Chinese firm met with considerable loss by the Albany fire. We regret their misfortune, particularly as they have for years proved themselves about the only reliable dealers in the branch of business. The Chinese tea merchant who lived in Utica 25 years ago has made a fortune in Boston and educated two daughters who are said to be credited to any civilization.
Just a final shout out to our brilliant Albany Symphony musicians, Jamecyn, Mitsuko, Dan, and Erica. Woo! Yay! And to Wei, of course. I don't know. Are you allowed to bow? Bow on the live stream. It's good. Yeah, and Wei. And to Derek and to our entire production team, thank you all very much. We'll see you tomorrow from Montezuma Wildlife Complex. Thanks. And to all of our friends here at the Canal Corp and the Power Authority, thanks so much for sharing your beautiful places with us. Okay. Great, everybody. Very high art. Beautiful playing, guys. Really consistently beautiful and brilliant. Is the beat off? Is the what off? It is still. Are we still broadcasting? You start saying mean things? Doctor.